Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. When you look back and try to identify those pivotal moments, how often are they connected to people? I think over the last few years, there's certainly more of those moments than in years past. And I guess that's because everything was kind of accelerated or augmented by the pandemic. But look, what I'm getting at here is that there are people behind those moments. And for me, one of those very special and pivotal people was on my show way back in 2021. And back then, we talked about leadership, how it differs from management. We discussed purpose, the importance of self-care. It was such a fantastic conversation that he's graciously decided to come here and talk with me again today. And in the 2 years since we last spoke, so much has changed and that acceleration just hasn't slowed down. But one thing I can tell you about Ken Jacobs, he's embraced it all. Ken has stayed at the forefront of leadership evolution and how it's playing out in the PR industry. And in case you missed our first conversation, Ken is a former PR agency executive who founded Jacobs Consulting and Executive Coaching a decade ago and has since worked with executives across local, regional, and global PR agencies to help them become better leaders and managers. His Taking the Lead column is featured monthly in the Public Relations Society of America's Strategy and Tactics magazine. He regularly contributes to PR News and the Public Relations Strategist. He's a PR legend, a man who knows or is known by so many in our industry, and it's truly a privilege to speak with him again. So Ken, welcome back, my second timer. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It says, I can see it says the return of Ken Jacobs.
Yeah.
Is that like a comeback?
It is.
No. Like Gloria Swanson said, I hate that expression. It's a return.
It's a return.
It's a return.
We go home again.
Sunset Boulevard.
As we were talking before and just sort of getting a little bit reacquainted with each other because it's been a couple of years, and although we've been in touch as people are apt to do these days through all the different doohickeys that we have at our disposal, it became clear that things change a lot in a couple of years, and even though I've been following you, you've been following me. Shame on me for not being in closer touch. I really wish you were, I wish I was more, more connected to Ken. And so I feel like this is somewhat of a homecoming in some ways. I should call it Ken the Homecoming. I don't know. Where it's like, back to the early days of the show where like I was really getting my feet and you were one of the earlier episodes, like where I felt like, yeah, this is working. And, I hope this episode sort of bears that out again.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out. We'll find out. Well, we'll see what comments
I have no fear.
But thank you so much for having me back.
So,
I appreciate it.
So how you been doing these past couple of years? I mean, we talked about all that stuff last time, and I hope we get into it again. But how's life been treating you?
Well, it's been really crazy and for everyone. And one thing I was thinking about, when you mentioned what's been going on and what a crazy time. But I think this whole notion of connecting more and wanting to connect more and wanting to spend more time together, I think partly it's due to the lockdown and the repercussions and everything else. But I think the other thing that happens is, and it's not age related per se, but you do get to a certain point, I think, in your life experience where you enjoy spending time with people who are natural connectors, and they can be introverts, they don't have to be extroverts, who are natural connectors, who, we use this word to describe you and me and our mutual friend, Michael Glazer, who are mensches. We just, I think there are people who are on the road, on the path, and it's about helping one another and helping others and helping strangers, and who are doing the work, whatever the work means. And I think once you're, I'm waxing poetic here, but once you're in that phase of consciousness, you are more and more attracted to people like that. And you just want more of them in your life. And I do, to your point, I think it was exaggerated, exacerbated something by the lockdown. But I think it's also about where we are in our lives. And we want to connect more and more with people like that.
Yeah.
I find that's what it is for me. I think the lockdown maybe gave us more time
Yeah.
to do that. I mean, I'll be very honest. June of 2020, I wasn't really busy. July of 2020, I wasn't really busy. And I actually had a few coaching clients whose coaching engagements were winding down. And they kind of said, well, I guess this is it, right? I'm like, well, first of all, you need me. I mean, from what you've said, I would never say that as a coach unless they had said it. And I can help empower you. And it's more difficult now than a month or two ago. And so I'm not going anywhere. And the reality is, I think coaches, we often say coaching isn't what we do, it's who we are.
It's interesting.
And you get better with every coaching session. As a coach, you get better with every coaching session. So I said, just because your company can't pay me now or for a few months, why would I stop coaching you? How am I benefiting? And and I offered that. I just tell your company, we're just going to keep coaching you. They can pay me back someday or never or whatever. And come that fall, when things were a little bit better for the company, they re-upped again.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I'm glad I did what I did. I did that with a few people.
It really did.
As many did.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not the only one.
Well, it really did. It's interesting because it really did kind of separate the purpose driven from the money driven or from the non-purpose, whatever the non-purpose driven people are, the folks who really believe in what they do, from the others. And, I'm sure a lot of folks would have just laid down the gloves and said, okay, I'm walking away. Maybe that's the wrong metaphor, but still they would have walked away. And you're right. You're not the only one. I mean, I've heard that like countless times. And this connects, I think, a lot to what you're saying about what we both said about the pandemic accelerating, but you mentioned connection. I mean, how it accelerated this whole idea of connections, and being a mensch, I suppose. But I've heard several people who I have deep respect for, who I see as mentors, who I've learned from, who let's be frank, have had careers and have the wherewithal to step away from things if they need to for a little while. But they've said again and again, when I was locked out of my clients, when my business slowed down, shut down, and I was down to either zero or, not knowing what was going to happen next, I just kept going. Mm-hmm. I kept doing things that I knew people needed, but I had to do them differently, right? So you couldn't do things the same way anymore, and we still can't. In fact, now we do them the old way and the new way mixed up, and it's a whole different new world. But hey, thankfully, the technology was here. Thankfully, people gave more time to one another, I think. And when you give more time to one another, something you talk about a lot, emotional intelligence, empathy, if you have those two things, I think you not only survived, but probably thrived through the pandemic or through the lockdowns. And I know it's weird to say that you thrived through the pandemic, but you know what I'm saying? Like you could actually help people.
You learn, I'm an introvert, big shock. And I learned, I didn't feel stuck in my home. So much of my coaching was virtual anyway. In fact, most of it was phone. And then when the world got all Zoom, I converted to Zoom. I had one client I used to drive to once a week and, out of the house at 6 a.m. to beat the traffic kind of thing. So when they went virtual, I didn't mind. And, the work stayed the same. And in fact, they're completely virtual now. They could go back. They've got a WeWork space occasionally, but no, that's their world now. So I think there was one, actually, we went to their holiday Christmas luncheon, was back in person again. And it was really nice seeing people I had not seen in, was it 3.5 years? It was just crazy. And there were some people that I coached who I'd not met in person before.
Yeah.
So it was just, but it's the world's changed. Look, the world always changes, right?
Yeah.
But we've never changed to with that level of acceleration before that I can.
No.
Not in my lifetime. Not in my lifetime, certainly.
I certainly don't know. Not in my lifetime either, for sure. If it's not in your lifetime, definitely not in my lifetime. And it's, and we both span quite a few decades here, but it's like, I'm not sure if the same thing, applies across all professions and all people, for sure. But in our, in my world here, that change is ongoing. You mentioned you mentioned how you hadn't seen people in several years, and then you get back together. That's still a feeling now. I mean, we're through it. People are getting together all the time. I mean, I'm hoping we're through it, but people are getting together all the time now. But our office never fully reopened. It's physically open, but the work culture changed so much that, and this will maybe kind of get us toward a discussion of leadership here a little bit, because I want to know your thoughts on this. Mm-hmm. As everything changed and we are sort of, do we go back to the office? Do we go back to work? When is that going to happen? And it's hanging over people's heads. Some companies decided, no, you're coming back. And some companies decided, keep doing your thing. And some companies decided, well, we're doing a little bit of a mixed bag. And I think we were heading towards the mixed bag, but then a weird thing happened, which is that nobody was showing up at the office and nobody really was held accountable for them showing up at the office. Mm. And when you thought it through, it's like, well, we're going to hold people accountable for showing up to the office. Why? Like, what is the reason? I mean, to connect with other people? Well, you don't have to necessarily do that in an office. We can connect with other people in person in many ways. So does that justify forcing people to go to an office often? So these questions went up and down the chain. And eventually, the company I work for landed at, own your day. If you're doing things, the way that work for you and for the company, and it's been working for you from, working remote, keep going.
Well, that's a much more enlightened approach than many organizations have taken and are taking. And I remember, the whole, we've got to get back, we've got to all be together, we've got to be together to be creative and this and that, and share that camaraderie and the mentoring. Well, wait a minute. For 2 years, give or take, you were telling your people, thank you, congratulations, you nailed it. We pivoted, we grew. If you're agency side, our clients are thrilled. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And, to now suddenly to say, oh, no, the work's not good unless we're in the office. Mm. Well, what have you been telling your people for 2 years? It just doesn't make any sense. And I'm not denying there is an energy that happens in person.
Yep.
But the thing is, how do you find a way to bring people back on an appropriate way so they don't feel it's a burden, and so they're not coming back but sitting in a cubicle? What is the point of that? If you're using it on the days in, and this takes some work to coordinate, but on the days in, to brainstorm together, to create together, mm-hmm. use that in-person together time well. And it takes a lot of coordinating, right? To get the same people in on the same day. I know a lot of organizations are doing more and more Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
And that's when you hold your brainstorms. But, the organizations and their leaders have to remember, people moved, they moved away because you told them geography didn't matter. So a commute now is a burden. Or even if they stayed in the same place, they gave up their hour-and-a-half commute twice a day. You found them 3 hours a day back. If of those 3 hours, they give an hour and a half back to the company and work, or even an hour, but more important, they take that time back for fitness and self-care and meditation and all those good things that make them more valuable to you. So what is it you really want? Do you really want someone in the office who, is stressed when they get in because of the commute and spends the last hour at the office stressing about the commute they're going to have home,
Yeah.
and how annoyed they are at the organization? I think companies have to give this a lot of thought
Yeah.
and really listen to your people. And I'm hearing more and more people are doing hybrid.
Yeah. Well,
Some way to say, let's get together when it's ideal to be together in a safe way, and let's just not make it mandatory. I wish I had written down, I saw a post a few weeks ago. I wish I had written down her name and her company to give her credit. Maybe one of the listeners can find this for me. Maybe she's listening.
yeah.
But it was, make your office a magnet, not a mandate.
Ooh.
Make your office a magnet, not a mandate. If you really want people to come back, give them something. And I think it's got to be beyond, Taco Tuesday. And I love tacos though, but,
Yeah.
and bagel morning and pizza lunch, you've got to make it more than that. If you really believe you are better together, you've got to figure out. The other thing though is so many companies pulled back on their real estate.
Well, yeah.
To make up for the lack of income, that they couldn't put everybody together every day. They just can't. So we're all still figuring it out.
Yeah, we're definitely still figuring it out. And, I think the answer is going to be different for every organization, for different industries. Now, I mean, but you're focusing primarily on the business services area, specifically in PR, PR marketing, but basically PR. And, when we're talking about agencies, a lot of our listeners here are PR people. They're agents, they'll get it. Or marketing people, they'll understand. For those of you out there who aren't and who've never worked in an agency side, it's not like any other company, because everybody there is a knowledge worker, right? So essentially and they're all organized differently, but people go there to brainstorm, to collaborate, to come up with ideas, and then of course to do the hard work of serving the clients that they work for, ultimately. And they could be working for you could be working for 1, 5, 7, 12, hopefully not many more than that clients at any given time. And, you're running around like a maniac, on any number of different projects. And, in that situation, it helps to sort of have other people to bump into and to talk to and sort of, to run ideas around. Bigger agencies have different teams working on different projects. You have different functions. You have creative people. You have account people. You have, media focused people. You have sustainability focused people, whatever it is. And the magic happens when you get one person from each of those teams in a room and, start making things, making ideas out of nothing. Without being together, hard to do that, but not impossible.
Well,
right?
Again, agencies and organizations did it for like 2
years.
Right? How long was it before we were really talking, maybe we should come back? I think it was 2 years. So it can be done. Can it be done better together? Probably. But, if we're doing it for the creativity and the energy we share, if you make it a mandate, what have you just done to the energy and the creativity? So organizations really have to decide what they're about. I think, to the point you raised, they've got to be great leaders, have to be great listeners, and be empathetic, but also know you're not going to please everyone. You're not going to please everyone, because if the majority of your people want to come back a lot, or frequently during the week, and then there's going to be some repercussion for those who don't feel safe yet, or don't want to, or have a bigger commute, or whatever. So how do you treat all those people fairly. Because I think it's one thing if you're brainstorming and everyone's on their laptop and everyone's in Zoom and everyone can see one another, that's one thing.
Yeah.
I do think it gets more challenging when you have 8 people around the table and 3 virtual.
Yes.
I find that hard. I find it challenging. We'll train, and I find training in person is great and energizing, and training if everyone's virtual, we figured that out. I still found challenging when I'm in a room with people and there's, 8 trainees, for lack of a better word, but then some are on the screen and I've got to, you do it, right? You figure it out. But I've got to be mindful to connect with everyone around the table, but also make people on the other end of the camera feel included and called on and listened to and all that stuff. That's a little harder.
That's harder. And, that's something I face quite often. And I think a lot of people are in the same boat as I am. One of the great things that happened during the Great Resignation, period of the last several years is companies realized that there was a lot of talent out there, and talent realized there were a lot of companies out there, and they weren't restricted to 10 miles or 15 miles from where they lived. The companies that we considered at the time to be progressive thinking, and I don't mean that in a political sense. I mean that in a kind of modern kind of practices sense. Those companies are like, well, why can't I hire somebody I'm in New York, but why can't I hire somebody in Nashville? Oh. Right? Why can't I hire somebody in Sydney? Whatever it is, as long as we can cope with time zones, which is not hard for the most part. As long as we can do that, what's to stop me? I'm actually saving the company some money by hiring somebody in a different, kind of cost of living area, perhaps. There's any number of reasons. But then you get to that, what you just talked about, where you're responsible for leading a team. You're responsible for, not only responsible, you're accountable for making sure that team functions properly and that you're delivering not only, what you're supposed to deliver, but always better, always more, always better than before, always improving. And yet now there's this challenge of, well, is the team really a team when they're not together? And how do you as a leader cope with the exact situation you were just talking about, where somebody is not able to be there in person almost ever, and that person's always on the big screen, and you break for lunch, you go to lunch together, that person's like, oh, I'm going to go get my lunch too, and you have to come and you sit, you do what you can to eat lunch in the same room, but let's face it, it's just not eating lunch together. I don't care how you dress it up.
I just think leading today is much harder than a few years ago.
So how? Well, what are some of the ways that you've seen it, and you've been talking with your clients specifically about that? How can we get into that a little bit?
Well, I think you really hit on it. The feeling of teamwork when we're not in the room, or in particular, to your point, when we're not all in the room. It's really hard. And I think some companies are sending their satellite people to the headquarters more and more to create that feeling of connection, especially in the first few months of employment. I don't know that it's, if it were easy, I could give you an answer if it were easy. It's not easy. So I think part of it is dialing up the empathy, understanding how hard it is for those not in the room, and being very choiceful about when you bring people together. Make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. But it's, it's very, very challenging these days. If you're empathetic, if you're a good listener as a leader, really good listener, if you encourage people to tell you what's on their mind, so you're not just waiting for them to say, hey, what's up? It's like, you've got to be out there seeking this feedback from your people.
Yeah.
What is it like for you? What else do you need from us? Can't promise I'm going to give you everything you need. But what do you need more of? And it's funny you mentioned hiring people. They're in other areas. They don't demand as much. But what I've seen out there is that people are saying, well, you're in New York or in LA or in Miami or San Francisco agency. It's irrelevant that I'm in Shaker Heights, Ohio. I want I want the salary. That's why I'm choosing to work for a New York agency, maybe rather than an Ohio agency. So
Yeah.
that whole thing of the percentage agencies are paying for compensation, it's definitely tougher, and that's put a squeeze on profits.
Yeah.
And
there's an expectations gap. There's an expectations gap, I think, for sure. That's even gotten more exacerbated, I think, over the last year or two. I mean, the agency side, I know agencies are doing quite well right now, for the most part. But the client side, clients aren't always doing as well. It's sort of a lagging indicator in some ways when clients, before that starts to hit the agencies, the clients start to shrink the budgets. And, I think next year we're going to see a little bit more of a dip in agency, overall agency revenue and performance. But the employees who are spread all around the country, that's exactly right. Agency people, it shouldn't matter to them. They're delivering the same product. Somebody in Indiana is delivering the same product as somebody in New York. Why should one get paid more or less than the other, right? In their minds. I understand.
In their minds, it's I'm providing value.
Yep.
In the organization's minds, it's but you're not paying these kind of crazy mortgages or rents or food or whatever the case may be. So, but I tell you, don't forget though, in the past, sometimes when it shrinks on the corporate side, they still have needs.
Yeah.
And often they will give that work to agencies. The other things, if you remember from 2008 and the previous downturn, is that when you come back to recovery, corporations are more, reticent to hire for fear, well, is this recovery going to last?
True.
So they will spend that money with agencies. So for some agencies, 2009 and 10 and 11 were great.
Especially the bread and butter, like the bread and butter kind of functions, right? The baseline, got to keep like what you need in PR to keep the lights on type work, classic client service, media relations, content creation, these things, copywriting, all the stuff that you get as the sort of core package when you're dealing with an agency. I think a lot of the corollaries, some of the more adventurous creative work, for example, or some of the more experimental ideas that may cost a little bit extra money are less likely to happen when companies are tightening their belts. But no, you know what? You're right. I should have sort of qualified that a little bit because, budgets shrink, but I know that from my perspective, as a leader of a communications function in a large corporation, my budget shrinks, but I protect the agency line because the agency line keeps my lights on or helps me keep my lights on, really. I can cut other things, but I'm very reluctant to cut that. And sometimes sometimes there's nothing you can do, but I was just thinking though, as you were discussing, the idea of leading in this new environment and, people from all over the country or the world, bringing them into meetings and so on, and dialing this whole idea of dialing up empathy and listening to people. I struggle with this a little bit. I have a team of a total team of 6, and everyone is so different, right? Everybody's a different, right? There's all different ways of looking at that from a leadership perspective. There's oh gosh, I'm forgetting my leadership theory at the moment, but adaptive leadership, for example, or there's the one where situational leadership, like these kinds of different approaches, and whatever's right works. Whatever works right. Everybody's different. We've spent a lot more time on things like assessments, for example, to figure out to get a better idea of how people communicate with one another. And it's been quite helpful. But as the leader of a team, everybody has such different communication styles and needs. Without being in person, my style is a much more personal in-person style, right? So without being in person, I suffer from not knowing my team as well as I could or should. It's like so I have to work extra hard to compensate for that.
It is extra hard, but I'm going to do some laser coaching right here.
Hey,
right now.
I love it. I knew this was going to happen.
Every time you say, I'm not good at, or it's hard for me, or whatever it may be, add a comma and the word now. Because once you say, I'm not good, or I'm not as good at, or it's tough for me on
now,
Zoom, or whatever, you've decided that your brain listens. That we are learning more and more and more the power of our own thinking. And so when we tell our brain, I'm just not good at that, I'm not as good at Zoom as I am in person, brain says, okay. Whereas if you say, I'm not good at that now, you or your brain will say, oh, what would it take to get better at it? And suddenly your brain is kicking into gear saying, all right, do I take a course or read a book or whatever about leading virtually? Maybe I'll get something from it. So,
or maybe what you do is you call your friend Ken Jacobs and say, come on my show and give me some free coaching for an hour.
You can do that too. Certain people only.
Thank you.
But in the inner circle, right? But we are just learning more. I always say you don't have to be a neuroscientist to use the neuroscience.
Yes.
And it's one of those areas that even a little knowledge is amazingly helpful. And if you can, I have found, add comma now, and then start to think about what would it take to get a little smarter? How would it feel to get a little smarter? You're going to start doing something differently. I think one thing we forget, I think we're so caught up in what I have to do and I must do. Those are not always great motivators, right? We all had to do homework in high school. Anybody enjoy it? Because we had to. But if you think about either what I want, much more motivated, or give yourself the freedom to think about how would it feel if I did X, Y, Z. So I'll ask you, how would it feel if you felt confident about some specific skills tied to leading in a virtual world and connecting with your people in a virtual world? How would it feel?
It would be a breath of fresh air, that's for sure.
It would.
It would be a relief. It would feel.
I wish I had a book about this that I could say.
Well, it would definitely feel a relief, and I've because I have been doing some thinking about this. And to your point, I've been on a journey, just like on a leadership journey, especially in the last several years, that has challenged a lot of my preconceived notions about the way that people interact with one another. But in a positive way, I've always tried to keep a learner's mindset about the whole thing.
Well, that'll serve you.
It wasn't easy at first because I didn't understand what that was until I read about what that was. And I said, holy crap, I often am just this fixed kind of intractable, non-growing person in certain areas. So how do I change that? And adding comma now was one way I can do that. So I'm going to activate that.
Thinking how good it will feel if I achieve it, or even if I start it. Because when we say, I wonder how that would feel, we really start to feel it. And it feels good. And maybe we get a dose of endorphin, right? And then you think, oh, well, gee, yeah, I'd like this feeling a lot more. Because when we tell ourselves we're not good at something, it doesn't tend to feel good.
Yeah.
So use how something would feel as a motivator. It really does work.
Yeah.
Could I share another thought that came up?
Please do. Yeah.
So, you're mentioning your team of 6, and you're going to start with your core Dan Nessel leadership style. Great. Know your core things as a leader. Know your strengths, know your skills, know what you bring. The more you are willing to customize your leadership style for everyone you lead. And 6 isn't a small amount. 6 is a lot. 6 is a lot. The more time that you can choose to put in to think about each of your 6, how do they learn? What are their values? Why are they connected to the company? Because, followers, even if they're leaders in their own right and managers as yours may be, followers follow the leader and feel more motivated, more engaged when they share some alignment between their values, the organization's values, and the leader's values.
Yeah.
And the organization, it might be the broader enterprise, but it's also going to be your little group, your little pod, your little community.
Yeah.
So they've got to sense some alignment. How are they going to sense that alignment unless you know what their values are?
Yeah.
So you can connect things back to the values. What is their vision? We don't realize it, but many people who work for us, our followers, have a vision for what they want our group or our community to achieve.
Yeah.
And they need to understand, your vision, like what's your vision for the group, and then their role in achieving it. So talking about, here's my vision for our group, what comes after, what comes next, what we can be, how we can get there together is really important. And what's their role in getting there? Think about how they learn, how they take in information. Think about all of that. And if you think about that before every interaction, every time you're going to give a new assignment, every time you've got to give constructive feedback, you'll notice I don't call it constructive critique.
Yeah.
I call it constructive feedback. Think about that. And it doesn't take long. If you're going to have a 20-minute meeting, spend 5 minutes thinking about this.
It seems like, so these points are not, new things that have come up over the last several years. These are just solid ways to manage people. And we talked about acceleration, and it just occurred to me that, the pace of change in organizations has accelerated growth and decline, whatever it is. But maybe one of the things that's actually decelerated a little bit is the amount of time it takes to get to know your colleagues when you are pretty much mostly remote. And maybe it's instead of calling it deceleration, it's more of a different type of knowing. I'm just sort of thinking about this as I go. I haven't really thought about it too much, but as I said, right, I've always been an in-person person now, that has changed tremendously over the last several years. Yeah. And I've built so many great, wonderful friendships and relationships, as we were talking before, that I never would have imagined without ever having to go to a networking event or having to go to an office or having to go to my kid's school or whatever it is to meet people. I've met lots of people and I have solid, great relationships now.
Yeah.
I have great relationships with people I've never, ever been in the same room with, and that's fine. Like you can, right? Yeah. That said, when you're, and it would seem like I should be able to just apply that directly to my team, and to a degree I can. I don't feel responsible as much for somebody I meet elsewhere as I do for the folks that essentially have, I have a lot of their, it's not like their destiny is in my hands, but I feel very, very responsible and accountable for their happiness and how they feel rewarded at work and how they feel like they're where they belong. What do they feel belonging? Do they feel, fulfilled? Any of those words that we look for, now it's on me, partly to make that happen. So,
well, I mean, look, leadership is not for the faint of heart, right? It takes great courage to be a leader and great, tenacity and all those things. But boy, when it works, when you feel you're on all cylinders, like there's nothing like it.
Well, thank goodness I have folks like you and Michael, who I've been able to speak to from time to time whenever I have a challenge, or whenever I've done something like that I know is boneheaded, because I do that. I make some big old mistakes.
Being human, right?
Thankfully my team has stuck with me through it all, and they've been fantastic, and I wouldn't have it on any other way. I'm learning from them all the time.
Going back to something you said, about how we've always known that in leadership, it kind of like customizing your leadership style and being empathetic and asking and listen, all those basics. But it feels like the need for them are on steroids, right?
Yeah.
It feels like the need for certain leadership attributes are on steroids. And to me, empathy is one, emotional intelligence is another, trust that they know you have their backs and you'll never throw them under the bus, and that you have to earn that. You cannot assume that. You must earn that. So I think those are some of the leadership, call them skills, call them attributes, that I think are indeed more important.
Do you think
in a virtual world and in an uncertain world?
Yeah.
An uncertain world. I won't call it challenging, but it certainly is uncertain.
It's different, and we don't. It's unpredictable in a lot of ways. So uncertain,
I think what's also changed is where's the next uncertainty coming?
Right.
When's the gas, the price of eggs,
when's the next shoe going to fall?
I mean, but it does, it does to me feel like the era of uncertainty, which started around March 13th, 2020.
Yeah.
In fact, that makes it great.
Well, I think you're about right. I mean, it's I'm thinking about this more deeply now, but this acceleration, deceleration thing. And with, I said earlier that the ability or that trust building, maybe it is that relationship building part of it has actually slowed down in some ways for me, but the need has accelerated. So it's a battle.
Yeah.
So I
can see that.
So even
you can't rush that, and you do have to earn it.
Yeah.
And that might take time. But I think the most important thing, we brought up some of our mutual friends' names.
Yeah.
Patrice Tanaka has a great quote.
Patrice,
about
my gosh.
Trust. It's, you've got to act in a trustworthy manner, no matter the consequences. Act in a trustworthy manner, no matter the consequences, which then calls upon the notion of courage and bravery in leadership, where again, it's not for the faint-hearted. It takes tremendous courage to lead people in this era. And I think, your courage just has to come through the laptop and the Zoom and the few times you are together.
Yeah.
The fact that we will get there. Whatever we've decided we're going, you absolutely know we'll get there. And I need you in the boat with me, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I always say, people's antenna are set very high, very high. They're very aware if the leader is experiencing fear, lack of courage, uncertainty. It's just like bing, bing, bing.
Yeah.
Right? But they so want the leader's courage. Courageous leaders are attractive, and I don't mean like just good looking like you. I mean literally attractive like a magnet. People follow a courageous leader. And so we have to give that to them, even in unsettling or uncertain times. I think it's one of the mandates or requirements of certainly of effective leadership.
Yeah. It's, I'm sitting here like reflecting on the last few years, and now I'm like, where did I miss these? Where did I miss that kind of when I was needed, or when I, what signals did I miss, and where did I possibly drop the ball with trust? And actually, I think it's healthy to ask these questions all the time anyway, if it did happen. And if you see some issues, I do have an anxiety issue for real. So, I mean, sometimes that does get to me a little bit. And I always have to kind of check myself before I wreck myself in some ways. Right. And as I enter into conversations that, in my mind are more serious than in anybody else's mind. And self-knowledge is important in that respect.
So I'll just plant a seed
Sure.
with you, which is the idea that, I always say my clients are really, really smart, really smart. And they're mostly PR people, marketing people, advertising, lovely people. I'm very lucky to work with them. But the one thing they're not is time travelers. And you're not a time traveler. We cannot, unless they've changed it and haven't told us, we cannot go back in time. So I think it's one thing to look back and say, here's the lesson I took.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I would do. Not if I could do it all over again, because you can.
Yeah.
But here's what I'm going to take from the future. So when you look to your past, be very mindful of not judging yourself harshly.
Mm.
Because if you're judging your behavior, and again, not a time traveler, it's just going to bring you down, and it's not going to allow you to see what you want to do differently in the future.
Yeah.
So learn from the past and then say, and what do I want to do? In fact, I'll share a quote with you. This is one of the differences, I think, between coaching and therapy. And I've never been in therapy. My understanding of it is there's a lot of time spent understanding the past, why things happen, why we feel the way we do, who do we have to forgive, who do we seek forgiveness from, all hugely important things, hugely important. But for me, the difference in coaching, and the past will come up, and we'll let the person clear the energy, but not go on and on. And I'll say, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your courage. Very enlightening. And with that observation, what do you want to do about that now? With the emphasis on you're the leader, whether you're leading yourself or leading others. Do, active verb, now, in the present. So one thing, and a lot of people are in therapy and have a coach, and they can work very well together. So you take that knowledge that you continue to explore with your therapist, if that's the kind of therapy you're doing. And then I feel my job as a coach, when the past comes up with a client, is to take them maybe by the collar, but gently, and bring them into the future with that phrase, what do you want to do about it now?
I'm chuckling a little bit because, it's not a coincidence that Michael, I'm a big fan of Michael Glazer's as well. Our good friend, the only other double guest on my show, 2-time guest on my show is Michael Glazer. So I said earlier that
do I get a robe like an SNL?
God, I may invest in some swag. I may invest in some swag for my return guests.
You should. It's kind of like, so Michael and I are like the Tom Hanks and Steve Martin.
So far.
The Dan Nessel show.
That's right. And I will be, and just in full disclosure, transparency, I do not have any other outstanding invitations at the moment to people to come back for a repeat or a three-peat yet.
Oh my goodness.
It's not to say it's not going to happen. I hope it happens. I have some great people.
Robe? Who needs the robe?
I'm telling you, TDNS swag. Anybody out there want to get me some?
I wear crap.
But what I was getting at though is that, I was smiling and a little bit, listeners can't see that obviously, but because, you and Michael have said almost the exact same thing, about thank you for your courage, sharing what's happened. Now, what are you going to do now, or what do you want to do now? And it's so important to keep that in mind as we go through our day to day as a leader and as an employee. Even, I even work with some of my employees, when they come with these kinds of issues. Okay, there was a screw up. I get it. It happens. Mm-hmm. Okay, it happened 5 minutes ago, yesterday, a week ago, 10 days ago. Fine. We acknowledged it. You took accountability for it. That's important. Now what? So what's the path forward? Let's figure that out. And I have to, kind of keep pointing that at myself sometimes and just make sure that that's the way I'm thinking. But what I was thinking earlier is that leaders today in this, this kind of duality between acceleration and deceleration, people need things faster than you can deliver them on an emotional level, perhaps because of the lack of in-person kind of collaboration. And there's a sort of lackadaisical or sort of complacency that can develop within an organization where, you're remote, so out of sight, out of mind. You're not meeting every day. You're not meeting as regularly as maybe you should. And you sort of just start to go about your business, and I think the bonds between you tend to get thinner, if you don't nurture them.
But it's really important that you're nurturing and not micromanaging.
Yeah.
Right. That you're building the rapport and the relationship and the trust and all those things.
Yeah.
But I call it the contract talk. Mm-hmm. The contract talk, right? Here's the assignment. Let's agree on what success looks like. Let's collaborate on when it's due to me. And do you want to send it Thursday? Well, that's a little tight because we're sending it to the client Friday, and you may need another revision. So, like, what else can you do? How can you make that better? And then when you agree on it, you say, now look, I'm not going to check in on you. I'm not going to ask how it's going because I really want to know if it's done. I might check, are you okay? Or are you struggling? Whatever the case may be. But I'm not going to follow up. And I need you to come to me if you're struggling, because I don't want to micromanage you, and you probably don't want me to micromanage me.
Yeah.
And you're going to learn to manage yourself with my support. The only thing I ask is that without fail, you meet the quality standards we set here. You're capable of them, and you agree to the deadline. The moment you suspect you might not make it, you're struggling, you've gotten another assignment, the moment your gut tells you that, and it will tell you early on, you've got to share with me. Mm-hmm. So I can help us figure this out. I can maybe change the deadline. I can maybe talk to your other people about what's really a priority and not. We can, but let's figure this out together. But if something is due at noon, you can't tell me at 11:55 or noon or 12:05 you're going to be late, because then I can't help you.
Yeah.
So that's the contract. And I think more and more we should discuss the contract with the people we lead at work, but in particular about getting work done, tasks, and deadlines.
Definitely in this
we don't do it enough.
Yeah.
So we either pull all the way back or we micromanage, and everybody's miserable. It's just crazy.
Definitely in this hybrid world for sure.
So we have to decide. And this goes back to, the importance of mindset. Not it's hard to lead or manage people in a hybrid world, but add the word, how do I? Mm-hmm. How do I lead and manage people in a hybrid world? And just by adding the words, how do I, it does kick the brain into gear. And it starts thinking, it starts considering behaviors. It increases the chance it'll take those behaviors. Very powerful words. How, not I can't. How do I? Huge. It's huge.
Neuroscience.
You just have to.
It's really good.
It really is.
I'm very. My listeners all should know maybe that I'm I'm keenly interested in neuroscience, but haven't really gone too far in figuring it out yet. I'm about to take a course actually called Neuro for Comms with a wonderful woman named Laura McHale. I don't know if you've ever been introduced to Laura. She was also on Michael's show, and she was the CCO of like Deutsche Bank in Asia for a while. Now she's a consultant and kind of all around amazing person with a doctorate in psychology and neuroscience and communication. So she's written this great book called Neuroscience for Organizational Communication. It's a very, very thin but power-packed book, and she's got a course to go with. So I'm about to embark on that. Maybe next time we talk, I can neuroscience you a little bit. But just kidding. But no, it's really like, I think it's important to keep that learning going, keep that going on. But really, what I wanted to actually ask you, so that I'm going into that and I'm thinking about, what are the things that are happening, not only in leadership and in the things that we do on a day, but in PR and in our industry, that we struggle with, not only as the people have to execute and figure out how to use those new things that are happening, but how to lead in the midst of all this chaos in some ways, or uncertainty, as you said before. We had just kind of thrown a couple of things around in emails and such, but what do you think are the biggest things, like, choose a timeline, short-term, midterm, long-term, doesn't matter, that are facing the people you work with within the profession, which for all intents and purposes is the profession. And, like, how are leaders struggling with it? Or like, what are the things you think are really things we need to look out for?
I don't know if I think about it as short, medium, and long term. I think everybody is trying more and more to embrace AI.
Yep.
And everyone I know, except me, have already explored ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet, but I know I need to. So I think that's part of it. I think, and AI well beyond ChatGPT.
Sure.
I mean, that's the thing that has gotten everyone, more understanding, I think, of what AI is in a very practical, tactical terms. But I think they have to go deeper and really understand what that means for the workplace. Is the ideal one.
Yeah.
I think, and I want to use the caveat that my focus month after month, year after year, is more about the human side, the leadership side. Because when I talk to most of, other than business development and writing the biz dev plan and identifying your ideal clients and pursuing them, et cetera, and fiscal best practices, I mean, that's really the bulk. Well, I think I have three types of consulting, right? The biz dev training and consulting, the fiscal best practices. And I also do a thing called it's like Ask Ken. And every 2 weeks, my clients come to me with something else. But I'm not doing deep consulting in some of these things. And what will we need 6 months and a year from now? Why? Because for me, when I look at being a lifetime learner and what excites me in my brain, is it on the consulting side, it would be truly understanding content, truly understanding digital, truly understanding analytics, truly understanding measurement and all that goes with that. I find what we've been talking about, in particular, the neuroscience of leading people, for me is more fascinating and more interesting. So for me, it's much more the human side. But that said, some of the things that my clients mention to me, not that I help them with, but that they're focused on, is profitability and making the numbers work when they are spending what they believe to be is way too much on talent, but it is what it is. There's that. It is figuring out, I want people back in the office more, but how do I make that work in a way that they will be engaged and motivated and all those things? So there's openness to that. And I think more and more focus on metrics, on proving your worth, and not just your worth, but proving that what you're doing is effective, and the things that aren't effective, knowing how to pivot and replace with things that are more effective. And then, though this doesn't really feel new, the idea of integration, the idea of, it's not just advertising or marcoms or media relations, but what's the interplay?
Yeah.
And when you get a great media hit, what can you do in social media to make it that much more valuable?
Right. Yeah.
And I suppose if you're killing it in social media, how do you get coverage of that in traditional media? But certainly integration has been around, a really long time. Now, because most of my conversations with PR people and agency owners is about the human side, it just tends to be much more of the things we talked about tonight. Well, actually,
I think it's well. First of all, I'm glad you went in that direction. Everybody's concerned about AI in one way or another. Either you have a positive feeling about it, a negative feeling about it. You're somewhere in the middle, but there's the whole spectrum. I have no doubt that it is a seismic shift to our practice and to our industry in ways that we still do not know what they're going to be. And that, yes, it will affect some people's jobs. It'll make some things easier and some things a lot harder. But one thing that it absolutely, at least as far as we know, cannot do is mimic or replace emotional intelligence and empathy and trust.
I like to hope that.
Well, so far. That's why I say so far.
I like to hope that. I'll tell you from the coaching side, there's a lot of talk about how much of coaching can be done by AI. And there's a lot of discussion out there, and there are a lot of, downloadable mobile things that you can use that, I'm a little suspect about because, but
right now,
the main thing is, don't fear the reaper. Never approach anything out of fear. Fear has never been a good business strategy, new business strategy, leading strategy, marketing. It's no fear. So I would say, when you approach AI, whether it's you in marketing, PR, and communications, or me as a coach, to be, how can I harness it?
Yeah.
How can I harness it to do what I do and do it better? Because I think if that's your approach, you're more willing to study it and learn it and figure out how to make it part of your practice. Yeah. And, if you're doing things in AI that used to take hours, well, then maybe there are things you can do with those hours. And I don't mean on a personal, I mean in work, in serving your clients, in changing the landscape of communications, in figuring out what's next, or even building some of what's next.
As they say,
so to me, a growth mindset and a positive mindset about anything always serves you better. Always, always, always.
I think 10,000% agree with that. Like it's looking at these tools and technologies as tools and technologies, as things to aid us. Yes, there's change, but then what that does? It allows you to move up the value chain and think of new ways to contribute and do more. Michael Glazer, who we've said now 7 times on this show, is doing fantastic things with ChatGPT to help him in ways that are sort of tangential to coaching, so he can focus in on the coaching and deal with like some of the minutia that, frankly, he has his own kind of, bugaboos about. Maybe it's not the thing he gets the most joy out of. So he's, we've learned that, it can help you create Excel formulas, and it can do coding, and it can do this wonderful. Do that. Like, do that stuff. Yeah. I'm a writer and a thinker. I don't want to sit there and try to figure out Excel formulas. By all means, ChatGPT, tell me what to code.
Right. Right.
And at the very, at the simplest level, really just understanding what all these things are and what they do takes like almost all the fear out of it. Because that okay, you can understand what the limits are and you can understand what the advantages are. So I think that's going to be the case for everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it goes to, when you look at relevance,
Mm-hmm.
if that's important to you, if you want to keep working till you decide you don't want to work anymore, then you've got to stay relevant,
Yep.
whatever field you're in. And this notion of lifetime learning is just absolutely critical. Absolutely critical.
Yep.
Like just like in a coaching session, you coach someone and you say things to them that you really need to hear. I'm having that experience in talking about AI and ChatGPT and all the rest. Because I think I've avoided a little bit jumping in, but it is important.
It's fun
to understand. Well, not it's going to replace me. What can I get from it? How can I use it? And how can I, if many people who go into coaching, I hope all of us, and I think many agency people go in because we're bound to serve others, right? We want to make something better in their lives. And I think that's true of agency people. So, so much of it is your kind of mindset. And it's like, I'm going to learn about those things to do what I do for my clients better. That just takes a lot of the fear away.
That's what I'm hearing from the people I trust and know in the industry. It's like, wow, we can do things a lot better for our customers, our clients, our internal stakeholders, whoever they are, if we figure this out. And if we figure this out, that's where we are now. We're just in this kind of, okay, we could try this, try that. And hopefully you're in an environment where you're able to do that. But I'm excited about it. There's some trepidation about what's going to happen, but there always is, like when things fall into the wrong hands or, as technology evolves. But you know what? You can't control what you can control. There's only so much you can do.
But, I think the key is learning, when it's out there, the great bugaboo, and what will it mean for my business and my career, whatever, you're giving it so much power.
Yeah.
And once you say, I'm going to learn about it and how it can serve me and my clients, you're taking the power back.
Take the power back.
Taking the power back that we never should have given them. See, now it's like I've gone public saying I'm going to learn more about AI.
Well, there you go. I have it here on the record, learning about AI. It's fascinating, Ken. I mean, you'll see when you get it, when you start to play with it, you just go down these rabbit holes and then you'll be like, that's not right. That's not true.
See, what I'm really nervous about is if you have me back in 2 years for my third time, and I've got to go before Glazer.
Okay.
That the first thing you're going to say is, so how are you using AI in your coaching practice?
I don't know if it's 2 years from now, I might be talking to a simulacrum of you then generated by AI because you've been able to like really make it work. That's where we're at now. Who knows?
Wow. Okay.
Who knows, man?
No. Why would I want to give up this opportunity?
Absolutely. And me neither. I love doing this. I love just having these conversations. Once again, it's been 70 plus episodes since you've been on the show. And I'm a lot of that's again due to those early days when I was just figuring things out. You're one of those pivotal people that I mentioned in the intro. I mean, I'm so glad that you're here again for me, for my audience, for our audience, remaining a pivotal person in my life. And, I think, I think what you said, like taking the power back, whatever, just maintaining that learner's mindset as we go forward is really the big thing. Look, everybody out there, again, I mean, you can go back to episode 34, but instead come just right here. Go to, if you want to find Ken, look up Ken Jacobs on LinkedIn. I'll link to it in the show notes. You can go to jacobscom.com. That's jacobscomm.com. Again, the link will be in the show notes.
And I would just say, if you look for me on LinkedIn, there's a lot of Ken Jacobs out there, but mine, I think, will either say Jacobs Consulting and Executive Coaching, or it might be Ken Jacobs, comma, and then a lot of initials.
A lot of initials, PCC, CPC, ELIMP.
All those things.
Yep. But it will be linked to in the show notes, and on Twitter, Ken's Views, just one word. Are you active on Twitter still, Ken, or not so much?
Well, I have been much less active
these days
in the last few months.
Understood.
We're all kind of figuring out
what's happening over there.
Where will it turn?
Yep.
The big shakeout.
Yeah.
What is it going to look like? And there are some people on there that we're not allowed on there. And I don't mean an individual. I just mean,
I hear you.
The hate speech. Let's be honest. Let's talk about it.
So,
the hate speech that makes us uncomfortable. So I have not been like now, if I share something, if I share one of my segments or something, I'll go to LinkedIn. Obviously, I go to my Facebook business page. Then I share it on my personal page. I'm not sharing as much, nearly as much.
Okay.
My goodness. I will go in from time to time and check if someone said something nice about me. I want to thank them. If they find something in LinkedIn and put it on Twitter, that kind of thing. But
But LinkedIn is the platform of choice for you.
I'm watching. LinkedIn's the place, man.
Okay.
So, I think a lot of us feel, a lot of the posts feel like Facebook. Like, nothing wrong. I mean, I think being your full personal, authentic self. But, I think the beauty and magic of LinkedIn is it's where professionals connect.
Yeah.
Though I'm going to say the constant LinkedIn messages I'm getting have got to be from bots.
I should mention to our audience here that, if you follow Ken on Facebook, you will be treated to the LinkedIn fails, which he often posts. So funny because they're funny because not only the context you provide, Ken, and the humor, but also because it happens to all of us. And it's like, oh yeah, I got that one too. Yeah. It's, I love the ones that are like,
tell when there's been a group of people, it seems, if they're even real. I don't even know if they're
most of them are not
or robots, or whatever. Right. But the ones, it looks like this whole group of people went to LinkedIn school and they all share the same message. But I'm going to tell, I don't get offended easily and I don't get angry easily. But the one thing that pisses me off, can I say that on air? Well,
yes, of course. We're an explicit show.
When someone says, Ken, I see you're a coach and I'm a coach too, so I want to connect. Well, okay, but you're not a trained certified coach. What do you coach people in? And then I see their profile. I can help you build a 7-figure income business.
The franchises.
With the dollars and the stars and whatever. Like, if you want to tell me that's what you do, and tell me politely, I think I can help you grow your business through LinkedIn. I will probably still decline, but I'll give you a polite answer. Yeah. I really will. And I'll explain I'm doing great using the recommendations of my consultant to whom I'm very loyal. Like Stop Now. But when it's the whole pretending to be a fellow coach, because coaches do connect and should connect, but no disrespect, it should be experienced certified coaches.
Yeah.
But, and don't they even realize I can see their profile? I can see they're just in it for the money. And I just ignore and don't even answer. That pisses me off. And that's first world problems, right?
Well, but it's your profession, and it's wrong. I always I get a love in that I hate them so much that they make me laugh.
Well, that's why I vent
all these
by posting the failures.
Yeah. I love the ones that kind of reach me and say like, hi, I'm, John Johnson. And the picture is clearly not John Johnson. Like the picture is like something very, very different. And you kind of look through and it's like, and like, I don't want to say any, like, I know plenty of, I've encountered a lot of people from Bangladesh, from India, who are wonderful, wonderful people. I work with folks like that, but I'm telling you, there's something going on in Bangladesh for these operators who want to grab promote my podcast for me, and their last name is Johnson. I don't buy it. Right.
Right.
So there's stuff like that happening.
And it's all over the world.
It's all over.
It
just happens to be from a couple.
It's just crazy. Now I've been getting the same one over and over. Hi, Ken. Really like your profile. You're really doing great things in coaching.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? And my reply, if I took, would be, you just did. That's really what I should say. That's it. That was your one question.
You had one question. Thank you.
That was it. You blew it.
Well, look, I mean,
I don't
we're all getting harassed, but LinkedIn is starting to beef up the patrols, I think, on these things. And,
I hope so.
But nobody's, it's hard to get around that. It's just the cost of doing business. I guess it's a first world problem, as you said. And it is a source of entertainment, but I agree with you. It's a pain in the neck. All that said, LinkedIn is the place to find you. Ken Jacobs, with all the initials PCCCPCELIPMP across his profile. Forget about Twitter for the time being, and look at jacobscom.com. I'm telling you, there's so much on jacobscom.com. I mean,
that's good.
The video. No, I mean, your videos, taking the lead, which is your column, but also the videos are always fun to watch, and certainly they're absorbable, not like this podcast, which if you've been listening this long, thank you. But 18, 20 minutes long, these great videos with leaders in the industry. And if any of you are out there in the PRSA, our PRSA members, you will be getting strategy and tactics. Look out for Ken in strategy and tactics. You'll be like, oh yeah, I've heard that guy. Always good to read.
Give a little tip of the hat to the guests on the show. I mean, I'm very fortunate. They are some of the top leaders in the world of PR.
Yeah.
And communications.
Yeah, we're getting some great people.
CEOs. And I'm constantly wondering, I asked them, do you want to be on it? And they say yes. It's like, why? I have to get over that. I've got to do a little self-coaching around that.
But
I got to, they just, in my view, they share so generously.
Yeah.
Their leadership lessons, their leadership faux pas and mistakes, and who were the great leaders along their journey. And I just feel they're just amazingly accomplished people, and they share it all, and so generously and so humbly. And I'm just, and we have fun. I mean, we laugh, we smile, we laugh. I make them laugh. I think that might be part of my brand. They make me laugh. We have, we cover serious things, but even these respected Uber leaders, I'll call them, they don't take themselves very seriously, which is really nice.
Well, everything you've just said is applicable the way to my perspective of you. So you're on my show. You feel that way about those leaders. I feel that way about you, and I have to say that
you just got to wake up.
My guests are great, but when you get your robe, you can tell me about it. But
that's true. I want that robe now.
But Ken, this has been, I mean, we've gone, again, long on the conversation. That's fine. I really have just enjoyed talking to you. I didn't want to stop it or end it, but at some point we do have to. But listen, everybody, jacobscom.com, Ken Jacobs. I'm just so happy you've been here, Ken. Thanks so much for joining me.
It was a joy. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening to the Dan Nessel Show. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. People always ask me, why do I do the show? I do it for the ratings. I do it for your validation. So do me a favor. Go over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or someplace else, wherever you're listening to podcasts, and subscribe, leave a review, rate me, and share with your friends. Anything you can do to spread the word, I deeply appreciate it. Thanks again for listening to the Dan Nessel Show.